welcome back everybody to the ATB NFL Live Show, special Saturday edition with the NFL having a triple header on a Saturday. No more college football, at least for right now. We'll get some more here at the end of the month and into the New Year's Six Bowls, all that good stuff. But for now, Saturdays are open as far as football goes, so NFL is going to take advantage of that, which just allows us to kind of spread things out a little bit, maybe make it a little bit easier to cover everything without having to go for an hour and 20 minutes before the game starts. So that's always good to see. So, any day you can get more football than normal. It's nice to have it spread out. Don't have to keep up with as much. I know it'll make it a lot easier for a lot of people. But also a little bit kind of scary for fantasy, I will say, because you kind of have to spread guys out and make sure you know what you're doing there. But other than that,
play the wrong guy early Saturday, you're just over.
It's over then. Yeah, and especially playoffs starting now. Like, this is probably not the best thing for fantasy. But everybody else, I think, will take the.
That's why when you're tanking, you grab Brock Purdy and just get it done and over with on Thursday night.
Hey, there you go. Fair enough. But with that, that's actually where we're going to start before we get into the games for today. Later on here, starting at 1 o'clock, we want to recap the Thursday night game since we usually don't get the chance to do a whole lot of that. So Niners win 21-13. You kind of expected that they would win the game, but both defenses played relatively well. I mean, the Niners didn't do anything too special offensively. They just kind of made some big plays when they needed it, and Seahawks couldn't really get it going for a lot of the games. So I kind of want to start with the big topic, right? We know kind of what's going on with the Niners quarterback situation with Jimmy G out, Brock Purdy stepping in with Trey Lance injuring himself earlier in the season already. And there's been a lot of conversation about the quarterback position in the future, not so much just now. Like, because obviously right now Purdy's the guy until either Jimmy G's healthy or until he proves he shouldn't be. But going into the future, we kind of know that this team already planned to go off of Jimmy G. They, were committed to Trey Lance until he got hurt. Now that Purdy's playing really well for the time being, people have been talking about whether there's a chance that he might be the guy moving forward opposed to Trey Lance. And I kind of want to get your thoughts on that. I know mine. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I want to we'll go to Tony here first. What do you think about that whole situation?
My thoughts are all over the place with this one. I love what Brock Purdy's done. It's super cool. Mr. Irrelevant. He's got a new nickname now. It rhymes with Brock. I'm not going to say it.
Yeah.
The team seems to really, really love him. Kind of like that Mike White feel where the team is just rallying around the backup and loves the personality, and he's doing enough to get it done in an offense that makes that relatively easy. Similar to Mike White, I don't think he's special. He does bring a little juice in the extended play area where if things collapse with Jimmy G, the play is done. Throw it in the dirt. Yeah. But with Brock, and now we haven't seen the downside of this, which I'm sure we will see eventually. He's willing to try to make something happen. And when you're not immensely talented physically, it's ultimately going to result in some turnovers that we haven't really seen, but we've seen it work well, and we've seen him operate the offense well. So he can definitely start games for them, and they can go on a Super Bowl run this year because of how good the rest of that team is. When we're talking long-term, I still think it's going to be Trey Lance starting and then Brock backing him up next year. I think Jimmy G is going to be somewhere else. And unfortunately for Trey Lance, his entire career so far has been either he's the backup, he's slated to start, but there's still all the whirlwind people saying Jimmy G's still waiting in the wings in case Trey Lance stumbles. And he's not been given the fair, he's our starter 100%. We're going to let him figure it out. And next year's going to be the same because everybody's going to be saying is it time to put in Brock Purdy the second that Trey Lance struggles? With any normal coach, I'd say ride Trey Lance. Brock is just a really cool backup to have. He's like Gardner Minshew. But with Kyle Shanahan, it wouldn't shock me at all to see 3 games into next season, Trey Lance is struggling, coming back off of his injury, and no fault of his own, Brock Purdy gets inserted as the starter. And that's just something Kyle Shanahan could do. But do I think Brock Purdy is an actual starter in the league? No, I don't.
Right. And let's go to Zach here. You kind of feel the same? You feel anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, no. I think Brock's performance this season, due to him being thrown in for the injury, has made it very easy for the 49ers to move on from Jimmy G as the backup. I think you saw everything and all the signs this offseason that pointed to this franchise is ready to give the reins to Trey Lance, let him take over the starting center of starting position of the offense for quarterback, do the plays, do the play calling, all of that, be the guy. But he got hurt. and Jimmy G went in. It just was a happy coincidence that Brock got an opportunity to actually show what he had a bit earlier. And I think, again, I said this last week, this is more a testament to Kyle Shanahan and what he can do with the quarterback position. Look at who he has had. No offense, Nick Mullins. No offense. Did he have Nathan Peterman for a little bit? Was he?
No, he would never entertain.
Okay, I didn't.
I'd love to see that, to see how
Hey,
far the system
you never
really can
know.
go.
You never know, because the man can coach an offense, and that's that. And what it is there are so many offensive playmakers on that offense that it doesn't matter who's throwing the ball. All Shanahan needs them to do is protect it and don't take bad sacks. That's all you got to do. Just dink the ball over to Christian McCaffrey. Give him the ball to run the ball. Throw it to Ayuk. Do a little like outside to Ayuk. Let George Kittle go off for the first time all year. Thank you for that performance for my fantasy. I needed that. Like all these little things. So I definitely agree with Tony. I think we're going to see Jimmy G somewhere else. I think two very big options could be Indianapolis and New Orleans. Two teams that definitely need a change at quarterback desperately. But I think like you said, the issue that's going to pop up is it's not necessarily that Brock Purdy could start for all 32 teams in the NFL. I think he found himself in a perfect position where he's with one of the best offensive coaches in the entire league. So he could pop in if Trey Lance is not doing well, but then you have this weird thing kind of like Tua last year and the past 2 years with Brian Flores, where it's how good can Trey Lance be if he doesn't have the actual backing of his head coach to like actually go out there and play the game without fear of just being yanked.
Yeah, I think this all kind of comes back to an interesting situation with quarterbacks in the NFL nowadays, where people look at quarterbacks and they look at what they do on the field, right? They look at their production. And instead of basing how good a player can be or what their ceiling is, or how good of a player they truly are, they do get stuck looking at the box score stats, right? And they look at it and go, okay, well, Purdy's been super efficient. He's been great so far. Clearly he's outperformed, in the short period of time he's played than what we saw from Lance. They look at that and they go, oh, well, he's better. And I think the problem with this whole thing is you have to be able to separate scheme from talent. And when you look at guys across the league, right? I mean, if you think let's put this hypothetical. If Brock Purdy was forced to come in and play for, let's say, I'll just throw my team out there because of our offensive coaching, the Steelers, right? Does anybody here think that if he had to come in and play, that he would be half as efficient or good as he's looked for San Francisco?
Well, here, wait, I'll do you one better. If Brock Purdy went to Kansas City,
yeah,
and you put him in for Patrick Mahomes, do you think Kansas City's offense is doing what Kansas City does? No, because Patrick Mahomes,
and they have a good scheme too, and that's the worst part.
And they have a fantastic scheme, but look at who they have for offensive weapons as compared to San Francisco. San Francisco is surviving solely because they have some of the best weapons. It's exactly like Miami right now. Part of the reason Miami has done as well as they have is because they have a game-breaking offensive weapons that not many teams can deal with.
Yeah.
If you have that to your advantage or the other team's disadvantage, the quarterback that you have does not have to do all that much.
And I think
it gets crazier when you have somebody like Patrick Mahomes who has nobody, and they're like, "Hey, go out there. We need you to do this." Travis Kelce repeatedly.
And I think it's funny because like you look at San Francisco, right? And the whole point of why they drafted Trey Lance, or at least what we thought, was the fact that we know what a game manager / not untalented, but not super talented quarterback can do in his game. We've seen it with Jimmy G. And, even whenever you have the best possible version of a Jimmy G quarterback, accurate, all that stuff, you have Matt Ryan in 2016, right? Like that's the peak of that type of player. And obviously Matt Ryan's completely different level of player at that time, especially compared to what he's had outside of him. But that's the peak of what somebody like that can do with this offense. And we haven't seen any version of that like Matt Ryan really outside of that year. He's never really an MVP type of player outside of the year. And I think Shanahan's scheme has a lot to do with that. What they wanted to see was, what if we had an ultra talented athlete with a huge arm who can make all the plays that our quarterbacks normally can't make, but also run our offense how it's supposed to be whenever he doesn't have to make a play, right? That's what the whole idea of Trey Lance is supposed to be. If you want that still, he still has to be the guy that you go to next year. And I think that's what's going to happen. But at the very least, you kind of mentioned, Zach, like now you know that if he gets hurt, if he's really truly struggling and they think they need to kind of sit him down, give him a chance to kind of recuperate or whatever it is, they have somebody who at least shows he can run this game, right? Like that's very valuable, especially on a 7th-round pick contract, the last pick in the draft. Like that's super valuable. If you can let Jimmy G go and get paid by somebody else to back up / start if you need him, that does help them. So I think it's a good situation for both Purdy and the Niners. I think it's given him an opportunity to already kind of maybe solidify himself as a long-term backup, if nothing else. And from there, he can see what his career goes from there. But I do want to talk about the Seahawks a little bit too before we go, before we move on, because it feels like at this point, and maybe it depends on how the rest of the NFC playoff field shakes out and how the rest of the teams around them play. But I really think they're starting to fade, and it doesn't help that Lockett's now injured. And Gino's still playing very well, but it's not like he's lighting it up as much as he was before. And I think part of that is him just kind of not coming back to earth, but starting to slow down a little bit, and so is the rest of the offense. And I do feel like they're going to end up falling out of this playoff picture. A team like the Lions, who's surging or something like that, they're probably going to be the ones that ultimately slide into that 6-7-ish seed.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. So, Tyler Lockett.
I just want to add one more thing to hammer one of my last points home, because I was just looking up when Kyle Shanahan was taking over for the 49ers. Mm-hmm. Kyle Shanahan started in 2017. Yeah. These have been his quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. Brian Hoyer, CJ Beathard, Nick Mullins, Jimmy Garoppolo, who has started the majority of the games for him, Trey Lance, and Brock Purdy.
Yeah. And he's been to a Super Bowl and almost two.
All right, man works magic. So for Seattle, they lost Tyler Lockett. He broke his hand. He's potentially out the rest of the season, at least a couple weeks. And these weeks are vital. They need to be winning out. So I think you're completely right that we're going to see them drop out of the playoff picture, which sucks because they've had such a fun season. The Geno Smith reclamation, jump into somewhat stardom. He's been really, really, really good. And so to see it end without a playoff appearance in a really weak NFC is sad. But ultimately, I think it's probably a better product if the Lions make it. And it seems like we're trending that way because the Tyler Lockett injury cannot be it is just so important. He's been so good for them this year. Him and Geno have this mesh, mind mesh thing. It's great. And it's going to suck without him.
Yeah. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah. Even if they do miss out on the playoffs, I don't know how the front office and Pete Carroll can really see this season as nothing but a success.
For sure. Still. Regardless.
Yeah. You trade away your franchise quarterback who everybody looked and was like, oh, you guys are just tanking. This is nothing. You nail the draft. I mean, they have had a whole great amount of contributors come from the draft this past year. You have now granted, not too high right now, but if they lose a couple more games to end the season, potentially have 2 top 15 draft picks coming into next season. I mean, you're not necessarily set up in a bad position. So while it will sting a bit to miss the playoffs, this was supposed to be a rebuilding year, and it's gone much better than you could hope. The loss of Kenneth Walker was big because that kind of killed all their momentum and all of that. And really, if you look back at their schedule, it's the trip to Germany is the mark of their down. They're down in the dumps because since that week, they've lost 4 of their last 5. The only win coming against the Rams, which you should beat the Rams if you're going to the playoffs. If you can't beat the Rams, that's a bit questionable. But really that Raiders game, I think, was the nail in the coffin because that just everything that Seattle did, the Raiders matched. And that's another team that has had a very rough season. And if you can't take them down, where are you going here? So the loss of Lockett is massive, but it'll be interesting to see what they do for the rest of the season with Kenneth Walker back in the mix of things. He was all right on Thursday, but against that defense, not many people are going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the problem. I think that they still have a shot theoretically. It feels like they're kind of in the downward spiral type of the part of their season where, again, no matter what happens, they've found a lot of success and they've had a lot of contributors that they can rely on moving forward. And honestly, I think that unless he like really just falls off the wagon in some weird way, they also have a quarterback probably for the next few years if he wants to come back. So moving forward, let's go into the games today. Of course, we're going to start with Indianapolis at Minnesota. This line is strange because to me, like I understand Minnesota's coming off a bad loss to the Lions and all this stuff, and they've been kind of trending downwards, but it's mostly been because of their defensive performance. And it's not like Indianapolis is really giving you a reason to think that they can have a big time offensive performance, even on the ground, let alone through the air. So the fact it's only -3.5 line is a little strange to me, but I do understand, Minnesota's in a tough spot right now. So they're kind of in a not so much tough spot, but they are kind of trending downwards as well, opposed to some of the other NFC teams that are right in their range of them. But let's start with Zach here. What do you think as far as this game score wise? Anything you want to talk about with it?
Yeah. So the I find it interesting. It's the line to me says everything about Minnesota's defense and how much they have zero respect. They're awful. They're bad. Like you literally genuinely have players looking lost out there. Like it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think the offense is also coming back down to earth a bit. They're not quite as explosive as they've been the past few weeks. Justin Jefferson is still doing his thing, which that was one thing that confused me last week when I was watching the game that they had. What was it? It was on Red Zone. It was the first half, and Justin Jefferson had 6 or 7 catches, and they're like, "Oh, a slow first half for Justin Jefferson." And I'm like, 7 catches for 70 yards. That's not a slow half. That's not a slow half at all.
I mean, maybe for him sometimes, but
by his standards.
But then he ended the game with like over 130, and I was just like, what are we doing here? Let's calm down. So I actually have Indianapolis covering. I have Minnesota winning 24-23, just because Minnesota slowing down. I don't know who's going to do it for Indianapolis, but they really haven't been able to slow down anybody. And outside of running into the buzzsaw that was the Dallas Cowboys, Indianapolis' defense has been doing fairly well this year. So, I mean, they've held it down a little bit. So, well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. What do you think, Tony?
Yeah. So I actually have, I have Indy not covering, but by like the slimmest of margins. So I think this is going to be a really offensive game. I know we've like Zach, you covered how bad Minnesota's defense has been, and they're missing or potentially missing like Cam Dantzler questionable, Harry Phillips questionable, Daniil Hunter questionable. These are guys that matter to their defense, matter a lot. And if they are out, that run defense gets that much weaker. And then Cam Dantzler being out, like Pittman is going to be able to get open. Paris Campbell's going to be able to get open. They're going to be able to distribute the ball, lean on Taylor, and they're going to be able to make moves on offense. And then Indy's defense, they have been good. They got dismantled by a couple of good teams, but they have been good. They're missing Kenny Moore and potentially Brandon Faison. I still don't know how to pronounce his name, but
no, that's 100% correct.
Okay. Yeah, hell yeah,
He played at Virginia Tech, so I know him very well.
The Hokie, yeah.
All right, go Hokies. So missing Kenny Moore, I think, is super important. They're going to be lining up Justin Jefferson in the slot a ton. He's probably going to have another monster day. I think it's going to be a shootout, and I just in a dome. I mean, I trust Kirk in like a normal afternoon game against a beat up defense to really, really spread things out and get the offense moving. So I have Minnesota winning 34-28. I think it's going to be super high scoring. I think it's going to be a really fun game, kind of similar to the Detroit game, and just like two offenses just going at it. And I just trust Kirk in that offense more than I trust Matt Ryan and Jeff Saturday.
Would this not be would this not be considered a prime time since they're the only team playing?
I'm gonna say it's because it's a 1:00 game and it's the first of 3 in the day. I'll say it's not a prime time game.
Okay.
They technically classify prime time as a night slot. Like there's question so it is an island game, which I don't know if Kirk struggles in island games versus like under the lights prime time game.
Okay. Fair enough.
I'll give Kirk the benefit of the doubt that this one won't get to him. But what do you think with this one, Zach? I'm sorry, you already. Yeah, I'm losing my mind. With this one, I think that for me, I just trust the Vikings a lot more. Right? I understand the defense has been kind of bad. Indianapolis is done. They're done. Right? I think their season is 110% over, not from just a playoff standpoint, but I think that they don't really care that much at this point what happens the rest of the way. Jeff Saturday does because he's gotten an opportunity to coach.
Hey, it's the first coach named Saturday to coach on a Saturday.
Okay.
That's important, maybe.
Probably not. That was a good one though, Zach. I didn't think of that one at all. Definitely didn't. Anyway. I just think the Vikings are a better football team by a significant margin, even with their defensive struggles. And I will take the better team in this situation at home, especially. I have 28-20. I think that Colts do score a little bit more than maybe they would normally do, but I don't think it's going to be anything too crazy. I think the Vikings pretty much handle them at home. Not really many concerns from them. Moving to Baltimore at Cleveland. Even as an AFC North fan will say, even though I'm a Steelers fan, I cannot help but not want to watch this game, kind of. If it wasn't for the fact that it was the only game that's going to be on at the time, since it's our Saturday slate, I probably wouldn't care to watch it. But it's just, first of all, you have a backup quarterback versus a guy who probably should be a backup quarterback based on how he's played so far since he came back. It's just not this. I can't imagine this is going to be a whole lot of fun to watch, honestly. But again, Baltimore managed to beat Steelers this past week, unfortunately for me. But they're just not a good offensive football team right now. Even when Lamar Jackson was in there, they're just so both beat up and just stale offensively that there isn't just a whole lot to get excited about. So I don't see them scoring a lot of points. I don't see the Browns scoring a lot of points with the way the Ravens defense is playing. But let's go to Zach here. What do you think for this one?
Yeah. So I don't know if I've ever covered this before, but I work overnight for my job. This is going to be the game that I get my my sleep during, because Smart. We said it last week. The backup quarterback situation in Baltimore is interesting, and if they're able to get a couple of wins if they're able to get a win this week and next week, they might be fine. But if they can't, there's a good shot that they could drop out of the playoffs with the way that the AFC West the AFC is stacked. And that's where I'm kind of leaning right now, just with the way that everything is kind of playing out. The way the Bengals are playing, I don't think they win today. Just because, Deshaun Watson has played awful, but I do believe that eventually some of that is going to go away because, again, it's been 2 years since he's played football, and that's definitely playing a massive factor in this. When you watch him, it just looks like he's out of sync with his receivers. I mean, like, it's completely stuff like that. They're just not on the same page, which will take a couple of weeks to come back. I don't think he necessarily goes crazy. What I do think goes crazy is the run game, as Nick Chubb is always good for a fun day against his rivals. And I have Cleveland covering handedly 27-13, taking it to the Ravens at home.
Fair enough. What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit closer just because I do think Baltimore's defense is just playing on another level right now. And I don't think that the Deshaun Watson-led Browns offense is really going to do a ton to stress that. He's been just, it's been bad. Mentally absent, I think, is the best way I can put it, because physically he looks like a guy who's shaking off some rust, but mostly fine. But like his unwillingness to throw open down the field, he looks scared. He looks like he forgot the speed of the NFL by not playing for 2 years. And I don't think that's going to be remedied mid-season. I think it's going to be something that has to be fixed over the offseason if it can be fixed. And I think they're really going to lean on Nick Chubb, and just because of the power of Nick Chubb and everything that he can do, and the fact that Baltimore's offense isn't really going to be doing much to stress the Browns terrible, but the Browns defense won't be stressed that much. I do have the Browns ultimately winning. I have them winning 21-16. I think it's going to be kind of low scoring, and Nick Chubb might get all 3 of those touchdowns.
Fair enough. So for me, my whole thing with it is, again, Watson has been struggling for good reason. We kind of knew that was probably going to happen. And if you look at it now, this doesn't matter as much because, again, I don't like to use like past stats too much when it comes to players' performances against teams. But in 2 games in his career against the Ravens so far, he only averaged about 220 yards a game, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and has been sacked 10 times against the Ravens in the 2 games he's played against them in his career. And against in most of those games, playing with better offensive talent overall, outside of Nick Chubb, obviously, is a huge help. But as far as his passing ability, I don't see them doing much in the air, obviously. I think the Ravens showed last week against my Steelers that a quarterback that's not seeing the field super well and is not acclimated very well, is going to throw them a couple balls that they can take away, right? Like that's going to be something that they try to do. And I think that ultimately the Ravens, even though they don't have as good of a running back, they have a better running game, if that makes sense right now.
Yeah.
Especially with the way that the Browns defense has played against the run. Like, I don't see them being able to match them run for run if that's where this game ends up going, which it probably will. I do have the Ravens winning 21-17. I think that they can pound the game out basically and just keep Watson off the field for a lot of the time. When he is on the field, I don't think he's going to be super successful. So I'll give the better team, even though they're at, going on the road, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they can get it done. Moving to Miami at Buffalo. This one we're going to spend plenty of time on for sure. This is the game of the day, right? Obviously, this is the matchup we've been waiting for, the rematch from that whatever game that happened earlier in the year that I still can't really figure out exactly what happened. Going to be a bit of a snow game, not nearly as bad as people were probably trying to make it out to be. We kind of talked about that pre-show. It's going to be fine. It's not going to be anything that's like insane or anything like that. So at this point, again, I think that this game is hyped up even more because of people talking about that. But this game is obviously huge, not only because there is still some playoff implications in terms of for the Dolphins just trying to get off a losing streak the past 2 games, for the Bills trying to maintain their stranglehold on the division. Like, there is things that definitely is important outside of just these 2 teams playing each other after the weirdness of the first game. Definitely want to start. We'll go to Tony first. Obviously at home with Buffalo. What do you think about this game in general? And do you think the line, because I wanted to ask about this for both of you, do you think the line is both fair and reasonable based on what we know about these teams right now?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying this. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling real good. I'm not having to deal with the snow. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. It is cold here. I have adapted to the weather. I am saying it is cold when it is like mid to high 30s. Different story up in Buffalo. But the line, I think, is fair because of how cold it's going to be and because of what that does to an offense that is not really built to deal with that. So I'll start. All of the Miami media who is now crying their eyes out about this weather after dunking on all of Bills fans who were in their own rights very whiny on Twitter after that week 3 game. I was told that weather is not an excuse and to stop being a baby. Call OSHA, go deal with it yourself if you're really that worried. And to the people
numbers
saying,
on speed dial.
Yeah.
To the people saying like, oh, well, aren't these the same conditions they moved the game to Detroit for just a few weeks ago? No. The conditions were literally 6 times worse. There is going to be about a foot of snow today. There was 6 to 7 feet last time. That is why it got moved. A foot of snow is nothing. That is what we are trained in. That is what we live in. That is normal. If we moved every game for a foot of snow, Buffalo wouldn't have a team. And I saw people saying that Buffalo shouldn't have a team this week.
That was something I saw, speaking of, which
it was on the
crazy.
Levitard show. It was very intentionally like it's drawing interaction.
Yeah,
it was well done. I appreciated it.
It's so funny though, yeah, to think about.
Worth
like, they shouldn't even have a team, but God, yeah.
Yeah. So now talking football. What this weather is going to do, and what weather always does, especially cold weather, is it equalizes and it brings out toughness. And I'm not saying that either of these teams are tough. Actually, honestly, neither of these teams are built to play in the snow. The Bills aren't built to play in the snow, and they live in the snow. And that's a long-term problem, but we'll figure it out. Luckily, we have Josh Allen at quarterback, who is just a giant beast of a man, and he's the one delivering hits. He's like, when he gets hit, the other guy hurts too. On the opposite side of the field, you have Tua, who's a bit smaller, a bit more susceptible to being thrown off by hits. And when it's cold out, those hits hurt that much worse. And I think we've seen the past 2 weeks him get just a little messed up by hits and thrown off his game, throwing to windows that aren't open, just not being on his normal game when he's getting hit. That effect multiplies when it's cold out. And I think that's where the weather comes into play. Is it's going to make Tua a bit skittish, I want to say. And then when you're relying on timing and speed and quick cuts and everything, that's when the snow might come in and mess things up. So for the Dolphins offense, which is very much like high flying, built on speed, built on cuts, built on getting the ball out quick, snow becomes a real factor. Cold becomes a real factor. For the Bills offense, it sucks because we can't run the ball, but we also can like get by because the offense isn't that like schematically, like it doesn't have the schematic oomph. It's not designed to like get people cutting in space and breaking ankles. It's just like, Josh, go play hero ball. And that's fine in the snow. That happens. So this game is going to come down to defense. It's going to come down to which defense can affect the offenses and make the elements that much more important. And ultimately, I'm leaning on the Bills secondary, which has gotten healthier, to really confuse things in the back end. And then the Bills D-line, which without Von Miller, Greg Rousseau has stepped up big time. Matt Milano is a screaming missile when he blitzes. Those guys are going to have to disrupt, and I think that they can. On the other side of the ball, it's if Christian Wilkins and Bradley Chubb have a monster game, then the Dolphins win this game. Like it's that easy. Like those two players just have to combine to stop Josh Allen, and they can do fine against our offense. I just think we can mitigate it. And so I ultimately have the Bills winning 27-18 because I think that they are a little bit better at surviving these elements.
All right, fair enough. What do you think, Zach?
All right, so I don't think the line is fair. And I only don't think the line is fair because, God forbid, I think Mike McDaniel might finally have realized that you don't have to go deep every play. So as well, Tony is very, very confident. I am a bit scared. And that is only because, not necessarily because of the performance of Tua the past couple weeks, because I definitely think that is an aberration. I don't think it's a standard of what is to come. I think it's more so because of the play calling, because that has been really the issue for Miami over the past 2 weeks. Because really that San Francisco game, they were in for a very long time, or not San Francisco game, the Chargers game. They were in for almost the entire thing. And despite doing some things that seemed to work and doing whatever, they weren't running the ball. They like refuse to run the ball right now, which is confusing as hell. Especially when you have Jeff Wilson Jr. and Raheem Mostert, who have been doing fantastic for you. So I think part of the reason why I think this is going to be why the line is a bit off is because I do believe that the weather conditions are going to change the game script for Miami. And I do think they're going to run the ball more, especially with Raheem Mostert. And I actually think you might see quite a few design runs for Tyreek Hill today because they're not going to be able to abuse the long pass. But one of the big things that Tua excels at is accuracy and getting the ball out quickly after the RPO and just decision making. And they have stopped doing that. They're trying to get these long, deep balls developed, which I get that it's worked and that you've been able to abuse it for a lot of pass interference calls. That's what I was looking for. Pass interference calls. But when Trent Sherfield, to his safety blanket, has 1 catch on 4 targets on the intermediate stuff, when literally the first play from San Francisco was a quick slant to Trent Sherfield and he went the distance. People talk about Tyreek Hill. People talk about Jalen Waddle. Trent Sherfield is to a safety blanket. And if he's not easily in the mix of things, it's bad. The Houston game messed up Tua a bit when they were like, hey, go out there and figure it out without Terron Armstead, because then Armstead being out hasn't really been that big of an issue for the past couple of weeks. I think that whole focus on that kind of messed him up a bit, and there was a bit too much of a focus where he's fine. The scheme has been fine. Go out and play your game. Don't like they've changed way too much to try to like beat out an injury that they thought was going to end up being a lot worse, that it's messed things up on the offense. That given that it's the snow, given that you're not going to be able to run your same game plan, I think that's going to change the game script. I don't have them winning. I have them covering, though. I have Buffalo winning 28-24. Josh Allen will split the series. If you told me at the beginning of the season we would have swept Buffalo, I would have looked at you and said, no, you're crazy. But it's not bad. We'll get back on the winning track here in the next couple weeks and wrap up that playoff spot, because I don't necessarily feel like there's like, when you look at the standings right now, and I just had them up. When you look at the standings right now, it is a fight at the bottom of the AFC between the Jets, the Dolphins, the Patriots, and the Chargers. The only two I really have faith in long term out of those four are the Patriots and Dolphins, just because I have more faith in their coaching and their overall like rosters. I'm not confident in the Chargers' decision making, and I'm not confident in Mike White and Zach Wilson, whatever they're doing with the quarterback situation right now. So I did just by elimination, Jacksonville is 5-8. I can't imagine they sneak up in there. So literally, it's Miami's to lose. If they lose out the season, it's pretty bad because things went wrong. But it's the rest of this. The end of the season is winnable. It's extremely winnable. So I don't think they win this game. Never thought they won this game, even back in September, because weather aside, this has been fantastic. I am so happy that the Patriots are mediocre again. So that, like I said when we were talking before, so that way the rest of the AFC East fans can go back and forth with each other and have fun again. This has been thrilling. No matter what you want to say about how the teams have performed this year, having the AFC East entirely competitive has been fantastic for the division and for all of the teams that have been underneath the Patriots for the past 20 years. This has been thrilling. I am excited for the next few years to see what happens, because all of these teams are good. It's not even like the Patriots have become bad. They've just taken a step down and everybody else has gone up. I'm so excited, no matter what happens with this game and the rest of the season, to see what happens with the AFC East over the next couple seasons.
Okay, yeah, definitely a lot to think about with the AFC. It's definitely been a fun division so far, with everybody being over 500 right now. Honestly, so for me, I think what this game comes down to is, one, Buffalo's at home in the snow. It's not as big an advantage, like Tony said, that it probably could or should be because of the way that the Buffalo Bills win. But to say that they don't run the ball well is incorrect, I definitely think, because they are top 10 in rushing yards. And
yeah, we
top
are the
5
only team in the
yards per
NFL to
attempt.
rush for 100 yards or more each game.
Yeah,
this season.
And now, granted, a lot of that is Josh Allen, which you could say isn't truly run game. It's more of Josh Allen saying, well, I need to do something, so I'm going to do something. Which, by the way, under 15 carries for him in this game, you think? Over?
Under on the carries, over on the yards, though. I think his number's at like 45.5 yards. I would
that I see it more. Yeah. But so I'm just going to point that out, that they can run the ball when they decide to. It's just they oftentimes do not decide to. I mean, Singletary's averaging 4.5 yards a carry. Cook's averaging 5.1, and not a ton of attempts, but he's still been effective when he's been asked to. I think they can lean into the run game, and they will in this game to a certain degree. I think the question is, can Miami just not only do they decide to do that, but can they then do that, right? Can they match you guys, blow for blow in the run game and make a few big plays in passing when they have the opportunity to? Because I know that Josh Allen is capable of it in these conditions. I don't know that about Tua at this point. I don't know that yet. I like to think
it snows in Alabama.
Listen,
that was the best thing I've ever seen.
I kind of understand what he's saying, because I think this is the point he's trying to make is, look, it's weather. Like, I'm going to play no matter what. But son, you're from Hawaii.
Yeah.
So let's throw that out there right away.
Just calm down.
2, Buffalo, New York is not Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I don't care what snow you've seen. I've lived in Virginia my entire life, and I've never seen a lake effect. So let's go ahead and quell that, sir.
No,
Let's not.
yeah.
Let's
I
not
do
look like
respect
idiots.
like how Miami's approached it in the media though. Like you
Oh,
can't let
yeah.
it become bigger than it needs to be.
No,
So
you
I
can't, no.
respect the like deflections. It's just very funny objectively the statement of it snows in Alabama too.
Well, I think that's one thing to keep in mind with what we're talking about with everything that like with this whole like, oh, the media has been ridiculous and all that stuff. The media was the one, and the fans were the only ones that were ridiculous from the beginning of all this. The team themselves did nothing wrong when these two teams played last time. This is solely the whole thing about it being postponed or it not being safe to play is totally like fan outrage and media, whatever. It has nothing to actually do with the team. Like these two teams have nothing but respect for each other. So that's what the funnier part of this whole thing is. It's like the fans are going nuts at each other because of what happened last game. But in the meantime, these two teams just want to play a football game. They have no interest in any of the fervor going on social media whatsoever.
No, yeah, and I think that's totally fair. I think that the conversation around this game is going to be more centered around that stuff than it needs to be, for sure. And again, I think it's going to play a factor for sure, but not as much as anyone wants to say it is. I think most fans, like you said, they're either like outraged that it's being played, or they're like, oh, this isn't fair. It's like, no, listen, if you play in an outdoor stadium, you get what you get, right? That's what it is, and the Buffalo Bills know that, and they've kind of, and like you mentioned, Tony, too, like they haven't built around that. They haven't even tried to take advantage of it in the way that some other teams might, and that's, I think, fine, because again, you only have so many games this time of year where you might have this, but again, at this point, like I'm taking Buffalo 24-20. I don't think it's a super high scoring game, obviously, but I trust them much more in these conditions, and mostly I trust Josh Allen because he can just decide to take the game over as a runner if he wants to. That's really just what it comes down to, I think. And Tua doesn't have that luxury. Like he has to rely on the rest of his team to make plays for him. Whereas Josh Allen can just say, "Screw it, I'm taking off because it's 10 degrees out or whatever the temperature is going to be, and there's snow on the ground. I'm just going to do this myself." He has that kind of trump card almost in a game like this, and I think he's going to take advantage of it. And that's what probably the difference in the game is going to be. I think there's going to be a couple big plays in the passing game for both teams, but just not enough. And I want to talk about Tua for a second because there's a weird situation with him where, like, if you look at the numbers, especially early in some of these the last two games, you kind of look at it and go, that doesn't seem possible. Like he was what 3 for 15 at one point, I think it was.
Yeah,
like that just doesn't feel like it's possible.
Well,
For
like,
any quarterback.
and again, it has to do with their play calling. Their
No,
play
it's
calling
not just
makes
him by
no
any means.
sense.
But like when you see that, you're like, that just doesn't feel possible for someone whose whole thing is accuracy. And then you look at the game, you're like, yeah, no, it's not good. Like nobody was playing well. The receivers were kind of not playing that great. Like he wasn't putting the ball on the money like he normally does. The play calling is weird. Like I do think that isn't going to be the normal thing. You said about that earlier, Zach. Like this isn't going to continue to that level. It may not be the heights that we saw, but it's probably going to be somewhere closer to the middle than whatever it was the past 2 weeks. So I'm expecting a couple of big plays this week. Yeah,
it's definitely
he's had guys open like shallow, and it's just that he's grown so accustomed to being able to hit these wide open intermediate routes in the middle of the field. That's where he's quick triggering to this. They're going to be watching back, looking at the tape, and McDaniel's going to be able to say, hey, man, I know we love throwing the middle of the field, these intermediate routes to our guys and letting them go for it, but you have guys open shallow, and this is the kind of game where we probably do see him like wise up to that and get better at just hitting the guys that are open.
Yeah, and it's definitely I think it's a twofold difference because the game in San Francisco, that one was Tua. He looked awful in that game.
Yeah,
that one was Tua in the defense. The defense was horrific. Last week I put as a total offensive failure because it wasn't just him. It was the only person that decided to show up was Tyreek Hill. And welcome to the Tyreek Hill show. This is what it's going to be. Like that fumble for the touchdown, that was the dumbest thing that I have seen in a while.
Like, again, like the fact that was something that happened, and like you still lost too, which is what really sucks. Like,
and that's where I go back to like even with the discussion of that game, You can't sit there and look at me and tell me that Justin Herbert played all that great in that game. Like both teams played awful. Both teams.
I think Herbert was fantastic overall, but I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, just overall, like I hate this whole, and I think we've said it on this show many times. This whole contrived idea that like one has to be better than the other. You got 3-4 quarterbacks drafted in that draft that are all doing fantastic. Let them all thrive. There's nothing wrong with that.
You can't have that though, Zach.
You
like,
don't
someone
have
has
to
be
compare.
bad.
I
No,
need
no,
rankings.
no.
Someone has to be a social media quarterback.
Defund lists. Lists are only made to make people angry.
Yes, I completely agree. It should just be like, here is the bar. Is your quarterback above it? Lucky you. If he's below it, that's
it used to be Andy Dalton was the bar, and then it was Kirk Cousins, and now it's like maybe Derek Carr.
It's not even like here's the bar, and like if you don't have somebody above that bar, like you're screwed. It's here's that bar. How much do you have to put around it to if they're below that bar to get away with it? Because we've seen some teams have been able to do it. Trent Dilfer has a Super Bowl ring. How much do you have to put around a quarterback to win? That's either pick the quarterback or pick the team.
Yeah, ideally. Is your quarterback an alien? No. Okay, we'll follow these steps to
build. Follow these steps.
Hire
to
Kyle
roster
Shanahan and just flood your roster with elite talent.
Yeah.
With elite talent and questionable what's it called? Questionable quarterback decisions for the entire time.
Yeah,
very questionable.
But yeah, I think that this game is definitely going to be super fun. I'm definitely going to sit down and watch this one. I don't know if I can say the same for the other two. I do have other things to do today, but I'm going to try to keep an eye on it, obviously. Not betting on it because I don't want to be that guy today. Basically, I lost real hard. I'm not going to lie to everybody. Do not take my betting advice if I ever say anything on here. Mostly because when I don't say something, I usually am right. When I do open my mouth, it doesn't go well. So we'll just go with that. So.
Yeah. I have a group chat with my friends. Anytime I like say, "Hey, this is looking spicy," they just immediately fade me and they win every time.
Yeah, because as long as you don't talk about it, you're fine. You just don't open your mouth. You go, yeah, you're in your head. You're like, yeah, this might work.
I'm still riding at a pretty nice high from Vegas. So
I'm sure. Yeah, I know you did pretty well.
So
but that'll do.
I have bets on everything but the Miami game. So
yeah, I don't like to bet on Steelers ever because I know.
I will bet on Miami. I just not this game.
Fair enough. Yeah, understandable.
If anything, I'm betting on the Bills. It's called an emotion. It's called an emotional hedge.
Yes, exactly. There you go. But that'll do it for us for today. We will be back tomorrow, though, to talk about the Sunday games, of course, and we'll recap these a little bit. I'm sure we'll spend a lot of time on Miami Buffalo because something is going to happen that's weird. I just hope nothing bad weird and something funny weird and not anything like that. So definitely hoping for some good games today. So if you're watching any game, definitely watch tonight's game. But I think all the games will have something to watch for. So that'll do it for us. Like I said, this for today. We'll see you guys tomorrow then.